Thank you for tuning in to another episode of One More Story. Just a quick programming note, parents, if you'd like to skip past the interview and go straight to the first story, you can find it at the 19-minute, 55-second mark, but the subscription option is there for you if you prefer to put on just the stories for the kids. And please be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on all social media platforms at One More Story Podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's episode. My guest tonight is Tate Ellington. He is a prolific and talented actor and painter. You may recognize him from Quantico, Straight Outta Compton, Sinister 2, and my favorite performance as a deceptively folksy cult leader in The Endless. Tate, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
How'd I do? I mean, I left out a lot of credits because I went on IMDb, as I always do, before a show to make sure I get these intros right. And you've been working nonstop for nearly 2 decades, it seems.
Fortunately, yeah, it's been about, close to 20 years at this point. You didn't leave anything out. Those are all my highlight reels.
Well, I had to put The Endless in, of course.
Oh, it's got to be in there. Well, yeah, which also is probably one of the ones I get recognized for the most these days.
Really?
It's the one I feel the coolest about. Yeah, it's and it makes me feel very hip because it's a hip crowd that digs the film. So yeah, but yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years, 8 years in New York, and then 12 years here, and then 1 year in Ohio, and 1 year in Columbus, Ohio, and 1 year in Newport, Kentucky.
Wow. So you were on shows working there, or?
I was working at a place called, it was a Shadowbox Cabaret. It was a sort of sketch comedy band thing in the mall that served nachos and pizza. And it was it's a good time. I just ran into somebody the other day who had actually gone to it. They were like, oh, it's like, yeah, worked in the mall.
Wow, sketch comedy in the mall.
You can't beat it, and then we would do some improv and different stuff like that when people were trying to buy their clothes at the Gap. So
nice.
Kind of in their way.
So how are you spending your strike days? How are you filling your time these days?
Mostly these days, I've been painting a lot. That's sort of always been my other career. Gone to school for that as well as acting. And so usually fill my time with that. Unfortunately, the studio I work in, which is my garage, tends to be close to 110 degrees inside. Has no insulation. So a lot of just sweating half the time down to essentially my underwear because I am so hot. And so just try and get that done.
That's vivid.
But then otherwise, been doing some of the picket lines, going out there to some of the different studios. And then mostly watching the kids, been doing a whole lot of running around with them, making sure they're taken care of, which is really welcome because they keep growing up on me. And someday they won't want me around. So
it's true. They say the days are long and the years are short. How old are your kids now?
I got a about to be 5-year-old and about, what is today, the 15th? Oh, yeah, 5 days. She will be 5. And then an 8-year-old who will be 9 in about a month. So they're off at school and you've got some time to yourself and you've got a quiet place, little breaks. Found a nice lonely closet that I'm sitting in currently.
You look like you've been kidnapped and you're making one of those videos.
It's holding up currently the date with the time. I've got a newspaper that says,
You are being held hostage by a children's bedtime story podcast. And I appreciate your time.
Which is not unsurprisingly like most of my nights. I sort of get held hostage for telling children's stories at night by my 2 wonderful daughters.
Well, that's perfect for this. And we're going to get into your nighttime routines in a minute. But I want to hear more about your painting and the types of paintings you do. And I want to talk about anxiety because I know that fuels a lot of your work or all of it.
Absolutely. Mostly for my paintings, it started out, I was always very detailed when I was younger, extremely detailed, realistic. Then slowly sort of became more self-taught at a certain point once I'd left school and switched into a little bit more of expressionism. Then recently, during the pandemic, I had at one point played around some with abstract painting. And then during the pandemic, sort of time constraints became where I didn't have time to mix up my paints and work as much on the detailed stuff. By the time I mixed up everything and got my palette ready, I would have a request from a small child to come and play or to come watch a Zoom session for school or things like that. So realized, oh, wait, you've been wanting to get back into abstract a bit. So have been fully embracing that. And it's been wonderful. Most of my stuff tends to be fairly colorful, fairly large. I can't paint small. I'm terrible at it. So most of the time it's minimum of 4 feet by 4 feet. One I'm working on right now is about 6 feet by 4 feet.
Wow.
And then luckily it's been really, really wonderful. I've had a number of, I'm working on a commission right now and tend to, I would say it's more figurative abstract, which is not really a thing, but I'm trying to figure it out because I still use some figures. I still use like hands and feet and some form of a person or an animal or things like that. But mostly beautiful colors that I thoroughly enjoy and make me happy. And I tend to use, I don't use brushes anymore. I use oil sticks, which is almost like drawing with a giant crayon in a way, except it's oil paint. And so I usually use all the shading I use my hands for. So it's usually like very tactile and sort of more sculptorally,
okay.
if that's a word.
So it's got some texture on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Like it's got a lot of that. And then sort of can be like kind of a grainy texture to it. Sometimes I'll add in sand, things like that, just to give it a little bit more grit. But so, yeah, it's been really, really wonderful. I don't have fingertips anymore because I've sort of, or fingerprints because I've worn them completely away by rubbing them on the canvas. So
if you commit a crime,
I'm free and clear. So if you hear anything, it wasn't me, and you can't prove it. So
so if you need someone to bury a body, call Tate.
I'm your guy. You want to give me a call? I can take care of it. I promise there will be no trace because I can't leave one anymore.
Well, in this gig economy, you just got to do what you got to do to pay the mortgage.
You take what you can.
Rent, People are going to be pushed to the extremes, so
you got to work when you can.
So talk a little bit about, because I watched an interview with you about your painting and about anxiety. And one of the things you mentioned was that you want the viewer to feel anxious as well. And so my question is, why would you want to spread that, Tate? Why would you want to do that?
Because I want to spread the love of constant fear and worry. Like, why would I want you to be comfortable? It's normally I try to have it more as like, so if someone can embrace their own.
Gotcha.
And come to terms with it. But normally, like a lot, especially my older figurative stuff, was a lot of people staring sort of directly at what would be a camera or somebody observing them. And just always felt, because longer story for that is I had books that I'd found. I'd go to Strand Books in New York when I lived there. Loved tearing through there and spending hours. It was kind of my getaway. And came across like old medical textbooks for plastic surgery, things like that. And they have these wonderful photos that are just the most sort of blank, staring directly into camera because they're doing before and after and comparing, what they've done. And so it's these sort of blank stares, but very emotional because, the people are about to go through different things or they're in the middle of going through things in their life. And just felt that had a very anxious feel to it, but also a very direct and emotional feel. So did that. And then I've now sort of converted that into my abstract. And as far as I deal with anxiety a lot, it's been a constant thing in my life. And luckily have sought help for those things, which I encourage everybody to do if you need to. But for me, painting now is trying to find a way I still get very anxious when painting. I'm still worried about messing up. I still get very, oh no, it's right. And then you're about to screw it up, so stop. But I found myself pushing myself through that much more of not worrying about screwing up and it becoming what I wanted anyway. And so part of the painting itself to me is the fight with anxiety and fear, but finding the freedom to keep going. And even if I do feel like I screwed it up, it's okay. And had a perfect lesson once where I'd spent months on a painting, absolutely hated it, kept doing it, couldn't stand it, was like, I cannot stand this painting. Had it in a corner, had a friend come by years ago and looked at it. He's like, who did that? Does that yours? Like, yeah, that's mine. I hate it. And he was like, can I have it? I love that. That's phenomenal. And I was like, if you will take this out of my house, please, you don't owe me anything. Just get it out of my sight. But he loves it. It's one of his favorite things I've ever done. And so learning that you never know what somebody's going to like, or what they will find in it or appreciate from it. And that's what I love about most of painting anyway, is that you decide. I like it when my audience decides what it is to them.
Right.
I know what it means to me.
Where can people buy your paintings, see your work? How do they find you?
Right now, I have a site called Saatchi Art, SAATCHI. But I have my stuff up there, sell through them. They've been really wonderful about some promotion, things like that. I also have my own site, TateEllingtonStudio.com, all one word. And then also on Instagram. You can find me either on my page at Tate Ellington or at Tate Ellington Studio. And that's where I've been posting a lot more of my work recently. Trying to learn to create content, which as a 44-year-old man, I am not as good at anymore. I'm doing my best.
Preaching to the choir, man.
Luckily, my wife is very kind to me because she will normally proofread most of my post or anything else, or just say, "This is stupid. You shouldn't post this." Okay. Thank you, my dear love. Thanks for looking out for me.
Yeah, no, I know when I posted I had 3 episodes done and I launched 3 the very first week, and I was meticulous. I overthought everything. I had sound issues because I was still learning all of this. And, I drove myself crazy because also I'm a perfectionist. I hate making mistakes, and I obsess over if there's a background noise or if there's something I can't remove or if there's any imperfection, I obsess over it. But because I've committed to a weekly format, I just don't have the time to micromanage and overthink everything. And there's something sort of liberating about it because, it's not perfect every week. There's always something that could be fixed or adjusted or made better. But there's something nice about just getting stuff out there.
100%. That's sort of that's what's been really nice about any work recently, and especially painting, all that. It just sort of being okay with feeling that you messed up and then realizing, you didn't. And also lessons trying to teach my, kids. It's sort of trying to remember, oh, wait, they're going to see you worry about these things. And so do your best to always let them know, no, try. And if you fall flat on your face, that's okay. And if it's not perfect, that's okay.
Yeah.
Also, while teaching them that, learning it myself.
Yeah. Well, and also the valuable lesson, too, that I've sort of taken me years to understand is that no one is paying as close of attention to you as you. I mean, it's sort of a narcissistic thing, right? Where you're like, yes. Oh, they're all noticing everything because they notice everything about me. And you're like, no.
Because I'm so important.
Yeah, exactly. And just like, get over yourself. No one's paying that much attention to you.
Yeah.
They're
thinking about themselves currently.
Exactly. But there's something liberating in figuring that out, because then you're like, oh yeah, nobody cares, nobody's paying attention.
Yeah, well, that absolutely ties into the anxiety thing of just like most of my therapists are like, I promise you're thinking about yourself way more, nobody notices you. You're like, okay, yeah. Great.
Well, how do you do in social situations? Do you have social anxiety or?
Oh yeah. I fake it till I make it.
Okay.
No, for me, I always enjoy smaller group of friends than a big, large party. Like anything that can be at max like 10 friends. I love that. We can all sit and talk, and I can find where either I want to sit or not. And I love to listen. I really enjoy listening to everybody. I feel like if I didn't have to talk, I wouldn't. But, then you become kind of weird in the corner, and they're like, no, you should say something. But anytime going to, my wife is very much an extrovert, very good about getting in there, wanting to meet everybody. And I have no not loving to meet people, but I get scared. I get really terrified. I have to prep myself to go into an environment. Same for work. Anytime going on set, it is a real here we go, first day. I overcompensate in a way by having a lot of questions to ask, or making sure I'm always what do you do? What's this job about? How does that work? And I'm genuinely interested. I really do love all the jobs everybody's doing, but it's my way of getting comfortable. It's also my way of being comfortable on camera. If I feel like I know everybody there, suddenly I'm with friends as opposed to, a group of strangers who are all staring at me, hoping I don't screw up so that they can go to their lunch break. But any kind of parties, those are rough. I also made a great mistake. good thing for a party was just a few weeks ago. It was somebody's birthday party. I thought it was somebody else's birthday party. I had the wrong person the whole time. And then me and my wife were at dinner before the party. I had decided, you know what? I'm going to be comfortable tonight. I'm not going to dress up. I know everybody there. They love me. Why would they care if I'm not in a nice shirt, See my wife in a nice sort of outfit. I was like, it's all right. She loves me. We're good. Oh, I can't wait to see, Britt. And then she was like, no, it's Bridget. And I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, no. We're going to this other person's house where you really know nobody. No, it's like, oh, great. And then felt the need to explain to everybody why I was just wearing a T-shirt while they were all dressed very fancy. But again, none of them cared. So worrying about yourself,
You hide it very well on camera because you come off so natural in your performances. So whatever you're doing is working.
Thanks, man. I really, truly appreciate that because it is. I also think part of that is that's the place where I can be relaxed in a way. Like that's almost, and I know you're not supposed to necessarily use your, everybody's like, no, acting's not therapy, which I kind of disagree with. I'm like, no, pretty much everything's therapy. It's, it's fine. You're working through everything. That's part of painting. That's part of acting. That's part of discovering about yourself and others. But that's where I feel safe in a way. And I still get really nervous. I still don't want to screw up. I'm still afraid of dropping lines, but somebody's already written the words for me. Right. And I'm able to go like, this person is this way. So I can be confident in what I'm saying. And then the second they call cut, it's back to like, oh, I'm weird. I don't know what to do. I'm going to go pretend to go to the bathroom just so I can get away for a second.
Well, so with your anxiety, you said you, in the interview that I watched, you said you wake up with anxiety and you go to sleep with anxiety. And since this is a bedtime story podcast, I am particularly interested in how you quiet your anxious mind at night.
Normally, getting ready for bed tends to be normally not in bed or not closing my eyes until midnight, which is stupid with 2 children who are going to wake you up early in the morning. But then usually settle down. I'll be on the couch. Maybe we're watching TV or something, but I'm normally drawing on my iPad. I tend to be doodling on that or roughing out paintings I've been working on or kind of toying with ideas so that I can go in the next day and kind of know what I want to do. And then normally we'll retire to the bed, lay down. And I would say for the past, I don't know, maybe like 10 years, almost since we got to LA, I read a couple of comic books before I go to sleep. Like something about it is, I enjoy it. It's easy. I'm not having to dive too deep in anything. I found that kind of once I got to LA, I stopped reading as much and listening to more podcasts or audiobooks, things like that. Because I used to read all the time on the subway. But usually that tends to be it, like a couple of comic books, kind of quiet my head down a little bit. Then I might look at the phone, but I tend to try and turn off any sort of, I don't like looking at any sort of social media normally before bedtime, anything that'll get my brain too sparked or anything like that. And, it's kind of comforting to watch, to listen or read, I don't know, the Hulk or see how he's doing and see how Wolverine's faring. I am probably just the most basic comic book reader. I wish I could do deep dives and name every amazing character, but yeah, that tends to be my kind of way to settle down.
And what about your kids? What's your routine with them?
Trying desperately to get them to go to sleep.
Yeah.
The routine tends to be like, hey guys, stay in your room. No, seriously, you got to stay in your room. Just go to bed. With them, normally we have the same sort of routine each night where get our baths, get those done. Normally, we fortunately have 2 bathrooms, so we'll, put both of them in. They're separate ones, check in on them, Wit more than Veda. And then normally start with Wit, we'll get her in her PJs, brush her teeth, and then usually tend to read about 2 books, maybe 2, sometimes 3, but 2 seems to be kind of all right, let's settle. And then, a lot of encouragement for the day ahead and making sure they always know that I love them and they're the most amazing things in the world to me. And they're the coolest, bravest, most awesome, intelligent ladies I know. So yeah, always ending with that.
I love that. Well, with that in mind, Tate Ellington, are you ready for your first story?
I'm ready.
The word is rock wall. Once upon a time in the countryside in England, a long time ago, this was probably 900 years ago, there was a very tall rock wall that divided the properties of two different feudal lords, because they had a feudal system in England, if I remember my history. I could be totally wrong, kids. This is not a history lesson. I'm just making up words. There was this rock wall, and it divided the properties between a very wealthy knight named Richard and another knight named Philip, who was not as wealthy as Richard. And Richard had many, many animals. He had deer on his land that would run. He had cows. He had sheep. He had pigs. And Philip had some chickens and not much else. He had a farm cat that would run around and chase the chickens. But Philip's property was kind of sad, and it was run down, and he just, these knights, they would make their money doing knight things and going on knight adventures, and they were part of a very specific order of knights. They were like mercenaries. They were like knights for hire, right? And they were in these like different groups, and Richard was in a group of knights that just got the better gigs, right? Like the king would be like, hey, I've got these two different groups of knights. Richard's group was named the Silver Knights, and Philip's group of knights, his club of knights, was named the Purple Knights because they felt that they were brave. And purple is a color that's associated with bravery and hope. Well, Philip didn't have a ton of hope because he looked around on his farm and it just wasn't doing that well, because he wasn't getting these premium assignments from the king to go do the cool knight things and go on, different adventures, go off to different lands and colonize people who just wanted to be left alone and live their lives. But in England, that's what they did. It was just the way things were, and they didn't think it was wrong, even though in hindsight, through the lens of the year 2023, we know that mostly people just want to be left alone, and they don't need saving, and they definitely don't need conquering. And that was the thing with Philip too, is he wasn't into the conquering, right? And so that's why in the conquering jobs, those were the ones that really, really paid well, right? And he just thought it was wrong. Like he thought that these other countries, empires, didn't need conquering. So he would take all the small gigs. Well, one day the king came to Philip and he said, Philip, I got a job for you and the Purple Knights.
The king, being a somewhat wise king, said, Philip, I need you to go and find another land that we can conquer. Philip said he knew it was his opportunity. He knew it was a big one. He knew this could change his entire life. He could possibly get more chickens, more sheep, maybe even a nice pig or two. He said, sure. Or more appropriately, he said, why, yes, my liege. I would be honored to go on this journey to find other people and conquer them. At least that's what he said. Now, what he was thinking in his old brain there was, oh, no, I really, really don't want to do that. I don't like conquering. I like living here. I wish I had more, but I really don't want to go and take over a whole nother group of people, especially ones I don't know very well, or at all. But he knew he had to do what his king had asked, despite his reservations. So, Philip spoke to his other Purple Knights. He said, gentlemen, we're going on a quest. It'll be a long one. We'll need ships, we'll need horses, we'll need food, we'll need rice. You gotta have rice. If you don't have that, it's a problem. It's one of the most popular items really to eat across the entire planet. And they said, but I thought we were against that. We normally do the small jobs. He said, I know that. I know we normally do the small jobs, but our king has asked us to do this one. Okay, said the other knights. You do know we don't like conquering, correct? Like we've established that. He said, yes, I'm aware. We talk about it quite often. That's normally one of the things we say to each other the most is, hey, I don't want to conquer anybody. Can't we just go and, I don't know, hunt for deer or something in the magic forest? There was a magic forest, by the way, but that's a different story that maybe will be addressed another time. So the knights gathered up their things. They wished their loved ones goodbye, said they don't know when they'll be coming back, but they know they'll be conquering when they do. Their loved ones said goodbye. They also said, but I thought we didn't like doing that. They said, yes, I know, again, but we have to do it. So they loaded up onto their ships, and they sailed away, all the way across many seas. They came to a distant land, and when they landed, they met a new group of people there, who turned out to be very much like them. In fact, they were also knights. They also had a king. They also had rice, which again is one of the most popular foods on the planet. And they said, we're here to conquer you. And then the other knights, being taken aback, said, well, we were coming to do the same thing to you. That's surprising. So they had somewhat of a conundrum. Conundrum would mean a problem, an issue. It's a big word. In fact, I probably didn't say what it was right, but that's okay. We can look it up later. So they said, Philip, to the other knight, said, well, first off, what's your name? Let's get that right out of the way. The other knight said, well, my name is Galfmore. Philip said, excuse me? He said, it's Galfmore. Galfmore. Well, that's an interesting name. He said, I know. I'm very proud of it. Well, Galfmore, said Philip, do you mind if we go ahead and conquer you? Galfmore said, well, no, I take umbrage at that. I have issue with that, my friend. So they realized they were at an impasse. So they decided the way they could settle this would be a race. Now, not a horse race. No. A foot race. Galfmore said, well, the only way we do foot races is in full armor. Philip said, well, just so happens that's the same way we do it. It's starting to turn out they have a lot more in common than they thought initially. So, all the gentlemen gathered around, all the noble ladies, all the noble knights, and even some of the peasantry, because there were things called peasants. Again, it's a feudal system, which we've learned is a not-so-good system, and hopefully we have gone past that. So they all gathered around. They met on a giant field. Philip said, I'm ready. Galfmore said, well, so am I. So they prepared for the race. And as they got down in their positions, ready to go, a terrible thing happened.
Galfmore pulled a hammy, and he couldn't walk. He couldn't race. He could barely move. It was a bad hammy pull. And if you've ever pulled a hamstring, you know how painful that could be. And so Philip sighed. He's like, well, I guess I win the race. And I guess we get to conquer you. And Galfmore took off his helmet, and he had the most desperate, pleading look in his eyes. And he said, Sir Philip, I have terribly injured ye hamstring. I need medical attention. The thing about the Purple Knights was they always brought a field medic with them whenever they would go anywhere. And this was sort of a new thing for Galfmore and his knights because they just weren't as advanced, especially with dealing with hamstring injuries. And, Philip had some struggles with his hamstrings in the past. And so he always insisted to bring the field medic named Roderick along with them. And he looked at Galfmore and he took pity on Galfmore. So he summoned Roderick with the med kit. And the med kit was a cured and tanned sheep's bladder that contained medical supplies. That's how they carried things back then. They didn't have Ziploc bags or backpacks or anything with zippers. It was sheep bladder. And Roderick came running over, and he took a look at the hamstring, and he pulled out some ointment, some herbs. It was a potion almost of herbs mashed with sour cream and onion, and it smelled delicious, but you couldn't eat it. It was really only to be rubbed on injured hamstrings. So Roderick tended to Galfmore, and instantly Galfmore started to feel better. And he said, "Where did you get this magical cream?" And Philip said, "Well, a guy here, Roderick, he's just, he's the best. He mixes all this stuff up. I don't even know what's in half this stuff, but it works. We got all sorts of that stuff over in England. I mean, not all the knights do, but the purple knights do." So Galfmore had an idea. He said, "Well, do you have corn?" And he said, "Yeah, we've got corn, but it's not great." And Galfmore was like, "Well, we have like the best corn in the world." And he said, "Maybe instead of trying to conquer each other, we open up a trade route. I'll give you the best corn in the world if you can send me medicine. That way nobody has to kill anybody and nobody has to get conquered, and we can all benefit." And Philip looked around at his other purple knights, and they were nodding their heads because they didn't want to be doing the conquering. They really enjoyed their modest lives, living on their simple farms, hunting deer, rescuing cats, all these like little jobs that needed to be done in the villages. They were cool with that. They were lovers. They were not fighters. And so he realized that that's what they should do. And so they loaded up their ships with the best corn in the world and shipped back to Old England. And then about 3 months later, because it takes a really long time to get across the ocean, they sent another ship with Roderick and Philip and a few of the other purple knights. They didn't need all of them because they weren't doing any conquering. This was a peace mission. They went back across the ocean and they delivered the best medical supplies that Roderick could cook up. And they maintained that partnership and that relationship for centuries. And no one needed conquering. The end. Tate, Ellington, do you have energy for one more story?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. The word is party.
Once upon a time, there was a old shed. Used to be the back of a house. The house was unoccupied. Nobody lived there anymore. The house had been there for probably 100 years, so a century. That's 10 years times 10 years, so 1010. If anybody's having to do math. So the shed behind this house that had been abandoned for years and was decaying and running down, there was a spider that used to live in this old shed. Now, she had been there for years, but she'd been there a long time without any other friends. Nobody really came around. She was still the only spider there. She hoped to have friends someday, but she'd heard of them. She'd heard of friends. But she was very lonely. So she decided, I'm going to have a party. Now, I've only heard of parties. They used to have them in the old house back in the day. Wonderful parties. They had cake. They had ice cream. They had beautiful, beautiful bouquets of flowers and party favors, and everybody would run around. The spider would watch those old parties, and she'd dream and dream of one day having one of her own. Well, now was the time. The time had come to finally have a party of her own. But how would she have one? She didn't have any way to send out invitations. She didn't even know where to go. But she said, I'm going to journey out. I'm going to leave the shed, and I'm going to go find some friends to invite to my party. So she packed up her things. She packed up her webbing. She left her old webbing there because hopefully she'd be back. But she got some things together. She still had a fly that she had wrapped up a few days before. Now she felt a little bad about it because maybe she should have invited him to her party. But she was hungry and she had to eat. And she was sure that the fly understood that. So she packed him up, put him on her back, put on one of her favorite coats because she always had a coat for the winter. It had eight arms, which sometimes could be hard to get into, but she'd figure a way into it. It was red. It was a beautiful red coat. So she started on her journey. The sun was high. She struck out. She crawled down to the grass and started walking. Now, the grass was tall. It was much taller than she remembered. It looked very short from her perch in the old shack. But when she got down on the ground, it was giant. She looked up and marveled at how amazing the ground was and how beautiful. And as she's walking along, she hears a rustling. And first she's a little scared. Even though she's a spider and some people are scared of her, she can also get scared. She said, "Who's there?" No answer. She called again. "Who's there?" Still no answer. She thought maybe if I put on a brave voice, then I won't be scared and I can ask. She said, "Who's there?" as she stamped all 8 of her legs. And then she heard a voice. "It's just me." "Who's just me?" "Oh, it's just me. Stuart." Said, "Well, would you please come out, Stuart? I'd like to see what you look like." He said, "Okay." Stuart came out, and Stuart was a caterpillar. She said, "Oh my, I haven't seen one of you in forever. Used to have caterpillars all the time at the shed." He said, "Well, what are you?" She said, "Well, I'm a spider." He said, "Well, what's your name, if you don't mind me asking?" She said, "Well, it's Gail. I'm Gail the spider." He said, "Well, what are you doing out here in the grass? I thought you guys usually stayed up in old sheds or up high." She said, "Well, funny you should ask. I'm on my way to try and find friends for a party." He said, "A party? What kind of party?" He said, "Well, just a let's get together party. Let's celebrate our friendship party." I said, "Well, I've never had one of those." She said, "Well, would you like to come along with me to help me find friends to go to my party?" He said, "Well, sure, I'd love to." So they started walking along. They walked further and further, started talking. Gail said, "Well, how long you lived in this grass, Stuart?" He said, "Oh, I don't know, about 10 years." 10 years, said Gail. "That's a long time." I said, "Yeah, it's been a long time, but that's okay." Then Gail, being intrigued, said, "Well, do you have any friends?" I said, "No, not really." "Huh, would you want to be my friend?" said Gail. "Really?" said Stuart. "Yeah," said Gail. "I don't have many friends myself. Everybody seemed to leave when the old couple cleared out of the old house that got abandoned." There were old people that used to live in the old house that got abandoned, in case you were wondering. But that's another story for another time. So, Gail and Stuart became friends, and they continued to walk. Then they came upon another sound. And then Stuart said, "Oh, what's that?" Gail said, "Well, let's find out." So she said again, "Who's there?" No answer. "Who's there?" Still no answer. So Gail said, "Stuart, say it with me." "But I'm scared," said Stuart. She said, "Well, I'm right here with you. I'll be with you. We're together now. We're friends. We can say this together." He said, "Okay." So then they said together, 1, 2, 3, "Who's there?" Then they heard a voice. "It's just me," said. "Just you?" "Yeah, it's just me," said. "Well, just me? Would you come out?" Okay." So as they're looking, the bushes start to shake, and lo and behold, it's a squirrel with a big bushy tail. He was a black squirrel. Sometimes you don't see those. They can be kind of rare. He said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" They said, "Well, we're going to find people to invite to a party." "A party? What's that?" said the squirrel. "Well, it's a gathering of different people and friends where you get together and you talk and you celebrate and you have fun. Maybe you have cake." "Well, that sounds great," said the squirrel. "Would you like to come with us?" said Gail. "Yeah," said the squirrel. "I was just sitting here in these bushes." "Okay, well, why don't you come along?" The squirrel said, "We'd go a lot faster if you guys jumped on my back." They said, "That's a great idea." So they hopped on his back, and they took off racing. As they raced through the woods on the back of the squirrel, whose name was Harold, by the way. They had forgotten to ask, but they asked later once they were riding. They said, "Oh, goodness, we forgot to ever ask your name before we hopped on your back and took off through the woods." And he said, "Well, it's Harold." I said, "Good to meet you, Harold." So they raced all through the forest, all through the grass and the fields, and they came across so many other friends. They came across a butterfly. They came across a badger named Sarah. They came across a dragonfly, and they even came across a bear. His name was Alan the bear. And Gail said, "Well, I really appreciate all you guys taking me to find people to have a party with, but we didn't really find anybody. I don't know where we're going to go." And then she thought about it. She looked around and saw all the other animals and insects, all the friends that she had made along the journey. Suddenly it dawned on her, "Well, wait a minute. We can have a party right here." They all looked at her and they went, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, we can have a party. We're all friends now. We've all had an amazing adventure running around, finding everybody. Whole time I thought I was looking for other people, and turns out I was looking for you guys." They said, "Hey, you're right. Well, what do we do at a party?" Gail said, "I think we're doing it. We're laughing. We're talking. Alan brought some treats. We forgot about that. He had snacks the whole time that he was letting us borrow." They said, "Yeah, you're right. So this is a party." And they danced. They had met some crickets along the way who started playing their legs as they do, like violins. They made beautiful music. People made costumes. And fortunately, they had party hats that they just happened to have anyway because, the badger had them. And so that's what they did. They enjoyed each other's company and getting to know each other better. And from that day forward, every year, they would come together to celebrate their invention of a party with all their best friends. And that's the way it went. And they realized that they loved each other, they cared for each other, and they took care of each other. And it was the best party they ever had for the rest of their lives. The end.